What's going on? Lex Gillette here. Got my main man Joe here. What's
Hey,
going on,
hey,
Joe?
hey, we're ready to get it in for another episode of Science School.
Another episode of Site School where we teach people to see, and this is actually an extension of the conversation that we had previously.
Hmm.
Earlier, we talked about elementary age kids and how we can be advocates for them and how advocacy looks as it relates to younger children within the blind and visually impaired community. But today, we're going to move on a little bit. We're about to get into these teenagers, right? They're a little
Ooh,
older.
hey, these are the years I remember.
Man, boy, I'm telling you.
Come on.
So really, man, let's just go ahead and dive into it and talk about advocacy from that teenager standpoint. And this is where, as a teenager yourself, you have to begin to kind of speak up for yourself. Of course, you have your support system, your family, your guardians, whoever it is. They are there to help get you the things that you need, right? And help you to realize your potential. But you're growing up and you're maturing. You should be maturing, and you have to begin to kind of speak up for yourself. What you got to say about all of that, Joe?
Man, I totally agree. And just to state, being a teenager is already difficult
Hmm.
within itself. You trying to figure out who you are, you trying to figure out life, and then to throw on top of it, you have a visual impairment. This is already a difficult time. And to piggyback off of the previous episode, we kind of hammered home things as people with visual impairments, what we would like to see, the guardians and the families and parents do and teachers to do to help in regard to create that foundation. I think and once you get into these teenage years, these are when perfect example, when you learn to swim, you learn to swim with a life jacket or floaties. When you learn to ride a bike, you ride a bike with the training wheels. Teenage years, that's when you start to take the life jacket off. You start to take the training wheels off, but you're not
Yeah,
completely by yourself, right? You may have the life jacket off, but you got somebody right there beside you.
right.
You take the training wheels off, or somebody's still right behind you as you are pedaling. They may not be
Uh-huh.
right behind you, but they're within distance to grasp and help save you, so to speak. So these teenagers, this is when you start to, or when the support system around you kind of let you go out and do things for yourself to a certain extent, where you come into the meetings and you start to, the IEP meetings, for example, the individual education plans, you start to kind of state things you would like to see, or struggles that you have. This is the time when you start to speak up as an individual.
Yeah, it's definitely to your point, yes, definitely loosening the leash
There
a
you
bit,
go.
if you will. But were you involved in your IEP meetings when you were a teenager? I wasn't involved. From what I remember, I don't remember being a part of my IEP meetings when I was a teenager. But were you?
I would say, yeah, I was. But part of the reason for me being in my IEP meetings, once again, going to a school for the blind, there was always this conversation of me going to public school. So there was always progression, right? There was always this, out of many goals, there was this one goal. How do we make that transition? So me coming into the IEPs, now I may not stay in the meeting for the entire time. I may come in for 15 minutes and it might grow to 20 minutes in the meeting. But something that I was very grateful for, I was allowed to be a part of that process, because that process had to do with me.
Yeah.
So thankfully, there were procedures put in place. The people, they wanted me in there, and I think any teenager should want to be in their IEP meeting. If you're not in there for the whole time, but you need to be in there for a good portion of it to see what
Right.
that process looks like, because the measures that are put in place for you. So
Yeah.
I was in my IEPs, and then when it came time, when I got closer to that time to say, all right, we're ready to transition. We're gonna. And then they decide, well, we're not gonna go all day. You're not gonna completely transition out of school for the blind. There was a program in place where I could go to public school for a portion of the day. So I was able to be in those meetings. It was almost like as if it was a corporation, right? And the corporation is me. Joseph Gray is the business. And I was in on the operations meeting, a strategic planning meeting. I was able to be in on these things to see what this process would look like, literally from getting on the bus, well, waiting at the bus stop to going to class, what my materials would look like in class, to how I was going to be transported back to school, to the school for the
Right.
blind from my public school.
As a student who attended a school for the blind, you that I'm talking about, why were there discussions surrounding you going to public school?
I think a lot of it had to do with exposure. I had only been around my quote unquote sighted peers at home outside of a school setting. And really, this was a time for me to step up. I've been in this environment that was catered to me, so to speak. I was able to get the experience of the real world as a teenager and also being amongst my peers. Now, I lived in Nashville where the School for the Blind was. So I was able to go to my zoned school, which was Antioch High School. Now, I live in Antioch. The majority of my friends and family are here. I'm playing with them on the weekends. I'm hanging out with them at night. But now I had to go into a setting that was school. So I needed to see what was it like to advocate for that and to say, oh, no, 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 I need my books in large print. And man, let me tell you something. Well, we're going to get to that in a second. But that was something I had to adjust. And like I stated in earlier episodes, I was already with the mind frame of I wanted to be around my friends. I wanted to be around, the crowd. So being in that setting not only allowed me to see, but it allowed my parents to see. It allowed my educators to see that that situation for me, this is just me individually, was not
Mhm.
conducive for my education
Right.
because I was caught up in an image. I wanted to do what everybody else was doing. So I didn't
Mhm.
really advocate for myself. There were things I did to kind of make myself not stand out, but then I still wanted to stand out. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So, because I'm trying to understand specifically. So, did you go to the school for the blind for the first half of the day, and then public school the second half of the day, or was it you took certain classes at the school for the blind, and then you took certain classes at the public school? How did that look specifically?
So basically, what happened, the way the plan was put together and what this process looked like, I would go to the bus stop, which the bus stop happened to be, my house was at the bus stop because my next door neighbor, which was my childhood best friend, like my
Mm.
little brother, he was already going to Antioch High School. Well, then I had two cousins on the other side of my house who were going to Antioch as well. So they were already catching the bus next door. So then with me now going, the school board, everybody else, they were on board. I caught the bus with him. So I rode the bus to Antioch High School. So I went to Antioch in the morning, and it wasn't even the entire morning. So TSB, 4 classes in the morning, right? 4 periods. So I was going to Antioch, and I would go to 2 classes. So by the time, and the periods were a little bit different, right? They weren't the same times at both schools. So by the time I got out of Antioch and came to TSB, it was probably the middle of the third period. So then I would just go from that and then just transition into the rest of the school day.
Right.
But something that happened in the beginning was, and this just had to do with me being a little embarrassed or whatever, but when it was time to leave Antioch High School and go to the school for the blind, I needed transportation to get there, and the transportation
Right.
wasn't going to be my mother or my family and anyone, like it wasn't going to be that. The school systems had to work that out, so they worked it out where I would catch. And I think I missed this part when I was in the meetings because I was so excited to be going to, high school with my friends because this was high school. So I was
Yeah.
like, man, yes, I can finally, So I missed some of the smaller details. So it was a bus coming to pick me up. So I'm out there, I'm waiting, and I see this bus come around the corner. Now I'm catching the bus not in the front of the school, but at the back. But the thing about the back of the school, there was classrooms and windows all across the back so everybody could see. So people could see me standing out there. And then this bus rolls up, and it's not a regular school bus. It
Right,
is
right,
a
right.
it's a smaller bus. It's a short bus.
You're right, right.
So immediately I get embarrassed. So I turn around and go back into the school. I was like, I'm not getting on that. Like, cause I already that made me feel so small. So
Yeah,
just because of the perception of a short bus,
yeah.
just
Oh
people
yeah,
automatically
that was like growing up. Oh, you ride a short
you
bus?
on a short bus. So
Oh
that
yeah.
automatically made me feel some kind of way. So I wasn't gonna do it. I'm not getting on that. So I literally, and this I don't recommend this. I'm not skipping school. None of that. I literally had one of my friends call his older brother to pick me up and drop me off at TSB. I
Mm,
was like, this can't happen. I was infuriated. I was so mad. They were like, well, Charlie's the only thing. So we got to figure something else out. I said, because I cannot be standing out there and then this bus comes to pick me up. But they figured it out. They had a van come pick me up. It was all good. But that moment, I had to advocate for myself. And now that I think about it, I shouldn't have cared. I should have got on that bus. And then when people questioned it the next morning when I went to school, I should have been able to say, well, this is why, whatever, whatever. But you got to understand, as a teenager, it's hard to work through those things because
yeah.
you're struggling with an identity on top of a disability.
Now, in terms of the bus though, was it something that did you have that perception or you created that thought in your head, or did people specifically say things to you like, oh man, you riding that? Is that's what you getting on right there?
It's both. Both of those things happen. And I can't tell you which one happened first, but I know for a fact they both happened. I have the thought in my head, I can't get on that because
Yeah,
of the perception of what that was.
right.
Now the reality was something totally different. But what we talked about before, at times perception can outweigh reality. And then yes, I had those conversations. I had people say, man, did did you get on that short bus yesterday? Were you standing outside waiting on the little bus? Like I
Yeah,
had those things happen. Now
yeah,
I can't 100% remember what my response was to that. I may have created some kind of lie, like, nah, bro, that wasn't me, nah.
yeah,
But both of those things most definitely happened.
yeah. I can definitely empathize with you because we I rode a smaller bus to school. Most times, let me see. Yeah, of course, in the morning, I would walk out of the house and get on the bus and things like that. I was the kid that I was asleep on the bus for the majority of the ride till we got to
Yeah,
school. It was so early. So I get off and go to school. But they dropped us off in a particular area where you weren't in that line of fire. So maybe
yeah,
some
yeah.
students might have saw you and maybe they didn't. But I would scurry on inside and stuff. And then once school was over, we were allowed to leave our class maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes early
Hmm.
to make sure we didn't that when that final bell rings for the day, man, it's like a zoo inside the school. So they were like, all right, well, we'll let you guys leave a little early so you can get out there, get to the bus. We
Yeah,
would get on the bus and then the bus would get out of there. So again, there may have been some students who saw us, but no one ever mentioned anything about it. So it was something that I was just like, all right, whatever. But growing up as a kid, and I'm not sure if it's still the same in 2020, but yeah, I mean, you have kids that that say things like, "Oh man, like the short bus,"
hmm,
and we live in that day and age now where we're totally breaking these biases,
yeah,
and that's certainly one of them that needs to be broken for sure because as a student, if you ride that and you're constantly thinking that, oh man, like there's an issue with me riding this vehicle to get my education. You know what I'm saying? Like you
right.
shouldn't you shouldn't have that thought process. You should just be all right. I'm getting on a vehicle and going to school so I can get an education instead of worrying
Yeah.
about what kids are thinking.
The means of transportation shouldn't determine the type of education. But those are the things that, especially as teenagers, go through. I mean, Lex, as a teen, as a teen, even before going to my public high school, being around my friends, where you go to school, what's his name? Do you know the lies that I used to come up with in describing where I went to school? I can remember vividly telling one of my friend's parents, well, where do you go to school? Oh, they're working on changing the name of my school. It doesn't have a name right now.
And this is TSB.
This is TSB, bro.
Okay. Okay.
Literally, I'm telling people they are working on changing the name. My school doesn't have a name. Or making up some crazy name of the school. And then of course people, there's people that live in Nashville their whole life. They're thinking, where you go where? And I'm throwing out some ridiculous name. And
Right.
I don't know where is that? And I'm like, oh, it's way, it's outside the city. It's way over somewhere else. As a
Yeah.
teenager, I'm thinking of these lies to
Yeah.
come up with because I myself am not confident, proud of who I am or at where I go to school. When really I could have used that as a learning tool. But I'm a teenager. I don't know how to do that. And that's what we want to
Yeah.
work on with this platform is
And
showing
it
people how to do that.
right. And it's almost like you wanting to feel, I wouldn't even say feel cool in this particular situation, but whatever something within you would not allow you to say, okay, well, I go to the Tennessee
Hmm.
School for the Blind. Can you say what that is, or do you know what that was, or was
Oh
it
man,
literally just
I most definitely can tell you what it is. Well, one, there were a lot of layers to this thing, but I'm gonna be honest. My visual impairment, my disability, played a huge role in that. And then what came along with my visual impairment, my disability, is that I don't I'm African American, but I don't appear it to the naked eye. So the
Mhm.
average person see they may think I'm white. They may think, oh, he's Byron. I used to get that all the time. Well, what are you mixed with? Like I'm some sort of dish that requires these ingredients. What are you mixed with?
Mhm.
So that played a huge part in it because I felt like, especially as a teenager, and I'm talking about from the age of 12 all the way to 19, even though I had a lot more confidence in 19 than I did when I was 12. But I truly felt like I had to prove who I was, what the race that I am. So that caused me to go. The only way I know how to say it is an identity crisis. I felt like to be one of my boys, to be my friends, there were things I had to do. There were ways I had to talk, all of these things. So I couldn't be honest and say, oh, yeah, I go to the school for the blind because I can remember my friends that knew. And now we're talking about, late 90s, early 2000s. So PC, being politically correct, was not a thing. I can remember arguing with my friends and them saying, oh, well, you're retarded. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, that doesn't make sense. No, I'm not. But then their response would be, well, look where you go to school.
Mm.
But I'm a teenager. I don't know how to express, how to say, how to articulate. Well, no, that's actually not true. But then they just get mad. So we fight, we rolling around, scrapping. But then
Yeah.
what's all good afterward? Because these are kids, especially as a teenager, when you get mad, you say things you don't mean. But once we
Right.
got older, and these were my close friends, once we got older, they would come up to the school and they'd hang out. They'd hang out with my friends on campus. They would come to, my sporting events. So all that changed. But it was worse when I was around strangers and I didn't know what to say, describe what's going on, especially as a teen. But for you, what were those? Because being a teenager is hard, like I said, because you're trying to be quote unquote normal. So what was that? What was that? Time period like for you as a teenager?
I would say, from what I can remember, I had a I had a lot of individuals in my life. I had a strong, positive structure both at home and at school, and
Mm-hmm.
so most certainly I dealt with the pressures of wanting to be cool and wanting to be seen a certain way and wanting people to think of me as this, that, and the third. Um, but as it relates to academics and education, first and foremost, it was. again, I knew that there were certain expectations of me, both from my mom and from my teachers. They didn't cut any slack. They expected me to do the same things that the next child did. And if it wasn't done, if the assignment wasn't completed, if I didn't meet those expectations, then there was a consequence behind that.
Yeah.
I even remember, I remember what was I was in eighth grade, I think. And so one of my friends and we had decided to sell some candy. and and I went to Sam's Club. I had bought a gang of Now Laters, a gang of like Airheads and Skittles and all sorts of stuff. And I had housed all of the candy inside of my locker. And for those first few days, me and my buddy, oh, we were making bank. Oh, we had money. We had money coming in.
Ooh.
And I remember I was in my science class.
Mhm.
Knock comes on the door. So Miss such as I ain't gonna say her name opens the door.
Yeah.
Opens the door, and the assistant principal is, oh yeah, well we're here to see Lex and Joe. So I walk out of the classroom. I'm thinking that there was this new computer program or computer class that was about to be started, and
Mhm.
they have been talking to me about being a part of it. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, maybe she coming to talk to me about that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
she coming to talk to me about this candy
Oh man.
and and how candy is not to be sold on school campus.
You distributing.
And oh man, so we walked over to my locker. I took the key, put it inside of the lock. Click, click. Go ahead and unlock it. Open the locker up. Man, she take all my inventory, all the inventory gone, but the money, I still pocketed the money. That was cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it was literally like, okay, well, you're going to be held to the same
Same standard.
standards as everyone else. And that was a learning experience for me. I was just like, man, oh, okay, well,
Oh, you
she
were
dropped the
expecting you.
hammer.
Yeah, you were expecting. You thinking, oh, well, it's the blind kid.
Oh man,
They gonna
she,
take it.
yeah, oh yeah, I'm a slide this time.
Yeah, they gonna
Yeah,
think, oh, he didn't know any better.
yeah, yeah, she gonna let me slide. But nah, it wasn't the case. But that was absolutely important because it established that precedence to let me know that, look, just because you have X, Y, and Z going on, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
You still are going to be held to the same standards as the next person. And then circling back to again that home environment, those are the things that my mom established, and there are consequences behind your actions, and it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, what your ability is, what your strength is, whatever.
Mm.
Like, there are consequences for those things. And so as someone who's blind or visually impaired, I think that that's a lesson that we all have to be introduced to as well moving forward, knowing that, look, you're not going to get any, this is not bingo, you don't have that free space. Like,
Right, right. Bingo.
so right.
And I think that's something that in progressing for families and guardianship and the support system around the students with visual impairments and that are blind is to understand, all right, you're not a child anymore. So what can we do to help? Because for these first years, we had to be the mouthpiece. We had to be the ones going out, shaking the bushes and doing all that. So now how do you turn that solo effort into a team effort, right? Because now you are able, so to speak, you can say these are the things. What now can the families do to help? Not even just the families, but that support system around that were leading the charge. What do they do to help in these situations in leading? How do they bring them up and almost make it now not a 100% equal effort, because still we're
Yeah.
talking about a kid. I mean, they're a
Right.
teenager, so there's still some things that they can't do. But what do they do to bring them up to make it to put a little more work onto them?
Yeah, I think that, so in my situation, it was, I started having chores specifically at home. I started having
Hmm.
chores. I had to wash dishes. My mom, she taught me how to cook food and, simple things, scrambling eggs or cooking hot dogs or sausage links or something like that.
Yeah.
Vacuuming the floor, washing clothes, cleaning your bathroom, cleaning your room, even ironing my clothes,
Yeah.
taking out the trash.
Hmm.
All of those things were huge. As much as I didn't want to do those things, it was helping me to see that, okay, well, if you want to hold down a household and you want to get to a point where you can live successfully on your own, these are the things that you're going
Hmm.
to have to do. And then as it relates to the academic standpoint, it was, I still had that same level of support and help. But you mentioned it earlier about, okay, well, I'm going to loosen that leash a little bit because now you're going to have to learn how to advocate for yourself and speak for yourself. And if someone gives you an assignment, your teacher gives you assignments, then I'm expecting you to do those things. And maybe your family doesn't ask you every single day, did you get your homework done? Did you get your homework done? Because now they're expecting you to do that.
Hmm.
And when you're in high school, it may be different now, but we used to get our interim reports in the middle of the semester, and then we got our reports at the end of the semester, end of the fall, and same thing in the spring. Get a mid report, and then your report card at the end. And so, if your parent does give you that leeway, and they're a little more lenient and expecting you to get that homework done, if you're not doing what you need to do, oh, it will come to surface.
Yeah.
They're gonna be able to see. It's gonna be on the interim reports. It's gonna be on whatever type of notes or whatever are being sent home or
Yeah. Yeah.
communications.
Whatever that
Oh yeah,
communication look
it's gonna
like.
come to pass. And I know, like, it's totally, some of the work that I do with the students who I mentor nowadays. I mean, they have apps on the phone and stuff
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
where teachers are able to stay in constant communication with the parents. And so, I mean, it's a lot going on nowadays. But back when we were going to school, you get the
Boy.
interim reports like every 9 weeks or something. Who
Yes,
knows?
man. Come
And
on.
boy, my mama would be looking at that thing from top to bottom.
Man, listen, let me tell you something. I tried to hide mine from my parents, but let me tell you how bad it was. I tried to hide it thinking I was being slick. But my cousin was the guidance counselor at the school. So what happened when that 9 weeks came up and they hadn't gotten anything in the mail?
Mm,
Man,
mm,
I will never forget it. It was a Friday, and at the schools for the blind on Fridays are a half a day, so that they can bust out, they can get the
yeah,
kids home, at a decent time because they got to go, all the way across the state. I
yeah,
never get it was a Friday. So on Fridays, yeah, the kids get out of school at like 12:30, but the staff is still there till 2:30, 3 o'clock. So I remember I was sitting at the house. I came in, I got off the bus, I came in, and I was riding a regular school bus. I remember the bus, let out. I walk into the house. I was probably 13 at this time. I walk in, and my dad was off work. And usually he's not there. Usually when I would come home, because by this time we were staying up at my grandmother's house. Usually when I get home, my grandma be in there. It's Friday. I come home early. She fixing. Like she in the kitchen getting
boy,
down.
collard greens,
Man,
neck
come
bones, all
on.
of that.
Wait. She getting down. So you should fix me something. So he was in there talking to her, and I was like, huh. But I didn't think anything of it because I knew that they hadn't gotten the report in the mail
Mm.
because I took it out of the mailbox.
Mm.
Boy, listen, we were sitting there. My dad was like, Joseph. Now, when he calls me Joseph, I know it's either a
You
chore.
know what time it
I
is.
know it's either something that's got to be done.
Right.
So he was like, Joseph, come here for a second. So here I go, sir. He said, did you get your report? Your 9 week report? I said, no, sir, they didn't give it to me. Which I wasn't lying because they didn't give it to me. It was put in the
Uh,
mail. Because I remember the
yeah.
teachers were going around double checking everybody's address. I said, no, sir, they didn't give it. He said, oh, okay. Well, he picks up the phone, still not thinking anything. I'm sitting right there. He
Uh,
dials the number.
uh,
So my cousin picks up the phone. He said, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, man, listen, that was the first time I ever felt I don't know what's that feeling, that heart drop into your stomach.
oh yeah.
And so she was like, well, we sent, I could hear her on the phone talking. She was like, well, we sent it. couple of days. You should have got it by now. But she told my dad, you know what? Don't worry about it. Let me go check and I'll call you back. Man,
Mm. Oh yeah, I already know.
I already knew. I was like, well, she gonna call back in like 15 minutes anyway with, tell them what's on the report. Cause I knew for a fact I had done bad in one of the classes.
Okay.
But we just gonna go on to the next story because that wasn't a good ending for me. But yes. So I think something that the families, it's like we keep saying, you gotta kind of gradually step back. It's like now when you're swimming in that life jacket's off, I'm gonna let you take 2 or 3 strokes where before I was directly, right beside you. And then I'm gonna kind of come and guide you. And
Yeah.
just understanding that this is a process that they gotta go through. And I think, and I keep going back to it, but being a teenager is not easy. That's one part of my life that I'll talk about and reminisce. But there's no amount of money that I would go back and actually like relive my teenage years.
Really?
No, no. And I had a lot of fun,
Yeah.
but not my teenage years. I'm not going back to relive those. Now look, hey, now listen, early 20s, hey, it's a price tag on that. But early teenage years,
Uh,
I ain't going back to. I'll relive
oh,
it. Hey, listen, we'll talk about it and reminisce. But,
yeah.
but bro, them years was hard.
Bro, I love teenagers, specifically when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely in high school, and then of course college. A couple years
Yeah, yeah,
of teenage that you are in college as well, man. Hey, I loved high school. I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
where I really like just made leaps and bounds and finding out more of who I was, and that's of course when I got into sports and things like that,
Uh-huh.
and so I definitely get it, but I hear a lot of people say that though, and they'll specifically say, "Oh man, I don't like high school. I would not relive those years again."
See, and
So whenever
I
I
don't
hear
even,
that, I'm just like,
yeah.
"Oh man, that's crazy."
See, and I don't even think it was the time in school. I think for me, it was more of the experience outside of school because, like I said, I struggled so much with who I was, and not only who I was, but who I wanted to be. Because I felt like there was the Joseph Gray that I wanted to be, but then there was the Joseph Gray that society wanted me to be.
Okay, who does society want you to be though?
I think society wanted me to be more of I'm gonna be honest, a stereotype. I think society wanted me to be more of, what they expected a young, a teenage male to be, especially at that time. And, there were some instances where I inserted myself in some crowds of people in some situations that I had no business being in. And truly, I think I put a hardship on my parents because they were up against a wall where it was a thing. Because, like I said, my family from the jump always encouraged me to what am I trying to say? They always encouraged me to be independent, and they knew we got to let them try to truly understand if I can do it or if I couldn't do it. There was never a time where they were, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. They always let me experience. So I think they were up against a wall because, well, where do we tighten the reins? Where do we pull him back from hanging out with his friends? And once again, it's that identity crisis. So I was not honest with my family about where I was going, what I was doing, these type of things, because I felt like I was between a rock and a hard place. Because maybe I didn't know how to be honest about y'all. Listen, okay, here's an example. We were at the fair one time, and this was later teens. I was probably 17, 18. So cell phones were, just not kind of being popular. So I had a flip phone. So I'm on top of the world. You couldn't tell me anything. And I'll never forget, we were with my friends and some of my cousins were there. And there was another group of people. And I pulled out my phone to see it. Well, of course, I had to get it up really close to my face. And I'll never forget this. Never. A girl was like, dang, do you need glasses? And
Mm,
everybody started laughing.
yeah.
So I played it off and was like, and kind of laughed too. But to be honest, as much confidence as I had at that time, I felt very, very little.
Yeah.
because I'm like, dang, she just embarrassed me in front of everybody. So here I am trying to see this phone. So from that point, for a very long time, I wouldn't pull my phone out in a crowd of strangers.
Mm.
If I got a phone call or a text, I wouldn't do it. Or
Yeah.
I'd play it off and act like I was busy and hand my phone to somebody and like, oh man, who is that? Who is that calling? Or what is it? Something like that. But those were times where, like I said, it wasn't so much the interaction in school, it was more of the times outside. Because like when I went to Antioch High School, I used to rap when I was younger. I don't care. I was good. You can ask anybody to know me, tell you I was good with words. I still am. So we go to Antioch. Like I said, I rode the regular bus with my friends and everybody else going to school. We used to get off the bus at Antioch High School in front of the cafeteria. It was probably about 15, 20 minutes before classes actually start because they had breakfast in there you could go get. In front of the cafeteria, everybody used to gather and they'd have these rap battles.
Mm.
And you had to be good to get into the rap battle at Antioch High School. So I had always rapped at home with my friends. I had done, little things, around town. So my boys were like, man, you gotta get in. You gotta do something. You gotta do something. So I jumped in and started rapping, and I was good. It caught people's attention. So every
Mm.
morning I'd always get into that. But see, me wanting the attention and affirmation of my peers caused me to be late to class, caused me to not pay attention when I was in that classroom, because then I'm trying to go sit in the back of the class when really
Right.
I need to be at the very front of the class. I need to be up sitting beside the teacher so I can see what's going on.
Right.
But see, those things, luckily I figured it out in my teenage years. It was a hard line to follow. Like I said, I feel like I put my family into some hard situations because of those things. But if I wouldn't have figured out, there's no telling where I would be right now.
Yeah. You talked about this stereotype that the rest of society or the world have for you. What specifically those things involved in that stereotype? Like, do you feel like they expected you to talk a certain way, to act a certain way,
Oh yeah,
to
most definitely. I had
to
I think there was the pressure also from everyone else around me to look a certain way, talk a certain way, dress a certain way, but even just act a certain way. Like I couldn't act like how do I needed to fake my visual impairment. I couldn't allow people to see because that might have been seen as a sign of weakness. That might have been seen as, well, something's, as we say, something's wrong with him. And then how do you correct people, especially 16, 17? How do you correct people and tell them, well, actually nothing's wrong with me. This is something that I have to accommodate for, but that doesn't mean anything wrong. It's not like a writing error or
mm,
a miscalculation in a math problem. There's nothing that's actually wrong with me because I think we have the as a society there is a skew on what it means to be quote unquote normal. Like what
yeah,
is normal? So you got to think as a teenager. I'm thinking because listen, I've said it before, like I can drive, but I didn't find out I could drive until I was 18 years old. Where
mm,
everybody else is driving it, they're getting a permit at 15, driving at 16, all these other things. So people are like, well, bro, why can't you drive? Why aren't you, and I'm making up all kind of lies and other things. But it was also hard for me to go above and beyond with these lies because with my visual impairment, I have nystagmus, which causes my eyes to move side to side. But also
mm,
I have an eye that drifts. It's lazy. That eye go way out to another atmosphere sometimes. You
yeah,
know what I'm saying? So
yeah, yeah,
I had to go, I say, oh man, I hit my head, something dumb. Instead of, and I keep going back to it, using those times to advocate for myself. But also, I was the only bit, when I left the school for the blind and I would go home on the weekends, whatever, man, I'm the only person with a visual impairment around. There's no one else. There were no older, there were no adults, there were no 20-year-olds
yeah,
around that I could see who had navigated their teenage years with a visual impairment, let
yeah,
alone that had albinism that were in my neighborhood, that were on my side of town that I constantly saw. So that was
right,
something hard to navigate. That's kind of going away. That's the whole point of this platform is that we can give these examples, we can give these scenarios because as a teenager, you are constantly looking for something to gravitate to
mm,
that has some quote unquote normalcy to it.
yeah. And I think that when you, as we continue the conversation on advocating as a teenager, specifically if we use the example that you gave about having large print on your phone and then people seeing that and laughing and poking fun and stuff like that. As it relates to advocacy, I think that it's important that you continue to read what's on your phone at that
Hmm.
size print. Don't let any of those things deter you from what you need and how you can succeed. If you need to view your phone at such and such font and it's larger than the average person, then you do your thing.
Hmm.
And it doesn't really matter what everybody else says. They can talk and chuckle and do whatever else. And but at the end of the day, you you use your phone the way you need to so that you can be successful and achieve whatever that you need to achieve. However, you don't want to allow any of those outside influences to cause you to change that font and make it smaller, make it smaller, make it smaller, and then now you're in a position where you're straining your eyesight and your eyes are being overworked, et cetera, et cetera. And you might be putting yourself in a position where it could be detrimental for the sight that you do have moving
Right.
forward.
Yeah. I mean, you could. I mean, you can mess around and harm your eyes even more because you straining trying to see, and that's something now that, especially the way the technology has progressed, you don't have to worry about, so to speak. But then there's situations where you do, because now you may be able to hold your phone away. You don't have to hold it way up to your face, but you still have to zoom in. Somebody could look over and be like,
Yeah,
"Dang, why you got one letter on the screen at a time?"
yeah,
Or your phone talks to you. Or they like, "Dang, why is your phone?"
right.
You see what I'm
Now,
saying?
I do remember those times where you have products that talk and you keep that thing on level one because you don't want everybody to
Man, you
hear
got
it.
that.
And you be in those classrooms where people are reading and stuff like that, and it's so quiet. If somebody drop a pencil, you can hear it. So you already know if you have a piece of adapted equipment and it's speaking out loud. If you don't have any headphones, it's like, all right, like it's a certain type of
And
just
then and then
just
you got
shame factor,
yeah, and then you
embarrassment.
and you got to think, man. Back then, that was all like a computer generated voice. It wasn't like what it is now. It wasn't like
Yeah,
Siri talking to you.
right.
It sounded like you legit had a robot in your
Yeah,
calculator or something. So,
yeah. I mean, it's definitely it's funny to think back to the things that kind of made me embarrassed and made me be like, oh man, I can't do this because then my friends are gonna be looking at me differently, and I'm not gonna be
hmm.
cool. But as a teenager, you have to just continue to stand true and know that you're the things that you're doing as it relates to accessible technology and adaptations and accommodations, you just have to trust those things and know that okay, this is going to help me get to where I need to go, even though you may have those friends or maybe they're not friends and they like to nudge and poke a little fun. Um, no, at the end of the day, everything that you're doing is going to help you in life as you move forward. You got to be able to do what you need to do, and not be ashamed, not be embarrassed. Just go after what it is.
what's something that teenagers could work on in regards to advocating for themselves, and how can their support systems be a part of that process?
I think one of the biggest things is knowing that your parent isn't going to be there all of the time, knowing that they're not going to be there to physically speak up for you and physically come to the school or pick up the phone or do any of those things. And so you have to begin to learn how to number one, first and foremost, know what you want, know how to articulate that, and that's going to help you tremendously, especially from an education standpoint, but just from a life standpoint. Being able to speak up and tell people what you need, what you don't need, what what's going to help you, what doesn't help you, what frustrates you, and all of the, like all of those things is useful because now I'm able to make recommendations and suggestions based off of what I know about you. And we talked about it earlier about being observant. I think that um, we talk about TVIs being observant, and as a young person who's blind or visually impaired, your parents and guardians need to be observant. But now, as a teenager, when you're walking in those shoes, now it's time for you to start being observant and being able to recognize the things, programs, resources, tools, whatever, technology, whatever. You have to start recognizing that, okay, is this something that is for me, and is it something that can help me achieve my goals? You have to shift your mindset to the point where it's like, okay, well, I need to start doing this because I know that my parents or grandparents or whoever is not going to be here to literally fend for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the big thing you just gotta understand. This is almost like the business side of my mind going. You are creating as a teenager and with your guardian, your family, your support, your teachers. You are now creating a partnership for success.
Mm,
So there are things that you are responsible for that you need to take care of, but then there's still those things that they need to take care of and be responsible for. So it may not be a 50-50, you know, relationship when it comes to what's being done,
yeah,
but you are still partners in this. Now your parents, your teachers, they might have a little more, especially your family. They may have a little more responsibility in this partnership, but the things that you are responsible for are still huge and very valuable for this partnership to work.
yeah,
Because the goal of this partnership, the reason that you are working towards these things, the end goal is for you to be as independent as possible. I can't stress that enough. You want to be, and they should want you to be as independent as possible. And see, that partnership looks different because the partnership that I had with my my family and support system is completely different than the partnership that you and your family and support system had. But we are all still working for that same goal, and that's to be as independent as possible. Because if I can do so many things on my own in regards of getting this everyday task done, that is a huge win. And
mm,
the same for you. But you have to be working towards that. You have to be your support system, whoever that support system is, your teachers, your family, your friends, your other schoolmates, their help and assistance cannot be. You have to be careful because you can overdo it, and that help turns into a crutch. And you don't want a crutch because if you have created a crutch for somebody, there's no way they're gonna make it to that goal to be independent.
yeah,
They're going to be dependent on you, and you don't want that. Okay, well, depending on the person, but still, you want them to have skills and talents that they can use that will make them a viable part of society.
yeah. Man, you hit the nail on the head with that. But in terms of the TVIs at this age, as a teenager, what specifically can TVIs do? What sort of a environment should they create? What sorts of things can they specifically do to help with this growth process for the teenagers who are in the BVI community?
I think right now, teenagers and the interaction with the TVIs, this is when the interaction gets. I don't want to say hard, but it gets a little difficult. It really The focus, it should get real. That's what it be. Because as a kid, you're still forming those things, and we're talking about kids. So
Mm.
there are some things you can work on as a child, but once you're a teenager, that's when the conversations about the next steps, like your career, your jobs, what you're gonna do once you graduate. That's what the conversation needs to be. What are these core things that you need? And then you need to be as a teenager that's blind or vision impaired. You need to be having those conversations with somebody about what you would like to do when you graduate. And I'm being honest, you need to be having those conversations need to be having at 13, 14 years old because there are pathways that can be put in place, but you also, hey, you got to be realistic. And I
Right.
can't say it any more blunt than that. You need to tell somebody what it is you want to do, and people need to be around you that are gonna say, well, you know what, maybe not that aspect of that occupation, but what in that occupation can you do? Let's figure out what it is that you're good at, what it is that you're passionate about,
Mm.
and how can we get that? Just for instance, let's say both of us having a disability. You and I are not going to be well, we are not going to be NASCAR drivers. We're not going to drive a car at over 200 miles per hour around a circle, right? So let's say for me, for instance, I wanted to be in NASCAR. I may not be the driver, but I could gain the skills to work in the aspect for one of those teams. I could be in the marketing. I could be in the computer analyst side of things. I could be in the management side. The overall dream, there's always more than one way to get there. And that's something, those are conversations that have to be had. And I think people will say, oh, that's rude. You can do anything you put your mind to. You can do anything you put your mind to a certain extent. Let's be realistic because if a kid came to me and said, oh, Mr. Joe, I want to be, let's take a kid that's blind. And they come to me and say, oh, I want to be same thing, I want to be a race car driver. Me, myself, I'm going to tell them, well, let's be realistic. What are the possibilities of you actually driving a race car? But you love racing, you love NASCAR, you love everything about it. Let's figure out what other pathways are going to get you into that.
Yeah. I'm trying to think back to the TBIs that I had in high school. Absolutely phenomenal,
Mm-hmm.
by the way. I think that they they literally did so much, but how can I articulate this? They did so much, yet and still it allowed me to really take the reins. It put a lot of ownership and responsibility on my plate, and that was huge because that was helping me to realize that okay, I can take care of this. I can do this. And at the end of the day, that is huge because once you walk across that stage
Mm-hmm.
from high school,
Boy, it's a different world.
you out here in the world now. And so being able to speak up for yourself and let people know what you need and literally just going after what you need, all of that, it starts years prior. And as a kid in high school, you have to you got to use your voice, and hopefully you would have your family and guardians, parents, and
Mm-hmm.
whoever, and all of these people to speak up on your behalf. But when you get out here in the world, you're not going to have them to speak out for you and speak up for you. And so it's important and imperative that you do it for yourself, not only for yourself, but moving forward, it's like you're paving the way for people who will come behind you also.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have that example and they can see that, oh, okay, well, Joseph did it. Oh, okay, well, Clyde did it. Then now they have an example of something that they could potentially shoot for. Um, and so in all of these conversations that we've been having, the advocacy piece of it, it's like, all right, well, if you successfully speak up and you seek out opportunities and possibilities and things like that, you are empowering your students or your child,
Mm-hmm.
and shifting their mindset and letting them know that, okay, well, this can be done. But ultimately, you're strengthening the entire BVI community as a whole, because the more examples that we have in that type of light, the more that the ones who come next are like, oh, okay, well, I saw Joseph do it. Okay, I saw Lex do it. I saw this person do it. So, like, how did they do it? What can I do so that I can walk in a similar type of light? Or better yet, I mean, I want you to be able to see what I do, or see what anyone else in the BVI community does. And I want you to be able to take that and excel even higher. Everything is about evolution and growing and becoming better. And yeah, you might do it well, Joseph, and I might do it well. But the reality is, whoever comes behind us, they have the ability to see what we do, and they can make it that much better. And if
Yeah.
they do that, then our job has been achieved.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man. You hit the nail on the head. That's once again, that goes back to that partnership that you have to create. And and those who are the guardians, the parental, the education, those teachers, they have to take that initiative to kind of push you in that direction and have those conversations. But you can't. Yes, you need to have a realistic conversation. Somebody needs to be telling you, these are the things that would take, and then let's see if that's actually something we can achieve. And it's going to be hard as a teenager. It's going to be, it might even be devastating. But just as much as someone is telling you, well, let's really hone in and let's focus on what these skills are, they need to still tell you and show you that you are valuable. We just got to
Mm,
figure out, how do we show your value to everybody else? Because you don't want to be in a situation, once you graduate, once you leave school, you don't want to be in a situation where people have told you your whole life, oh yeah, you can do that, you can do that, yeah, you can do that. Well, then you get out into the real world and you try to do that, and then you fail at it. And that failure in failing at something that you've dreamed your whole life to do could allow you to be just hurt in a way that you've never felt before. And I think that's why people have to be realistic. Don't lie and tell a teenager that, oh yeah, you can do it, you can do it, when you know that there's no way in the world that is possible. There's nothing wrong with telling somebody that they can't do something, as long as you tell them, okay, maybe not this aspect of that, but let's focus on another area of it. But then also try to figure out, are there people with disabilities and visual impairments in those realms? If so, let's figure out how to bridge and bring them together so they can have someone to talk to that's gone through it. But if there isn't, I mean, you have to figure out, how do I make this work if it's possible? And I guess that's a far reach, right? To tell somebody you can't do something, but then telling them they can't do it. What does that do to them mentally? I can see how, as a parent, it'd be hard to tell your child they can't do something because you want them to be proud of who they are and all these other things. But you just have to be realistic. You know, Reality has to outweigh the fantasy. It has to, because if you don't, you're creating a situation where that partnership isn't working out like it's supposed to. You're not truly working to the goal of being as independent as possible. You're going to the goal of being a yes person. Because I'm telling you, being slapped in the face by reality does not feel good. And you don't want to be sitting there as they are struggling with the fact that, well, you told me I could do this. Everybody's told me I could do this. But when they get out in the real world and they see that they can't do it, you see, that's just, I don't know any other way to say it.
that's a lot right there.
I
That's a
feel I
lot.
feel like this is a conversation that y'all need to reach out to the site school, have us come to your school, your community, whatever, That's why they need to send that email to the site school at gmail.com.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfect way to begin to put a bow on this. I think that we certainly in the beginning phases, the beginning stages as the elementary age student, there is a lot of responsibility from the family standpoint to be able to
Hmm.
speak up for the child who can't speak up for themselves, and the TVI being able to do the things that you can do to help support this young mind and this young life. And as they continue to mature and grow up, they eventually become teenagers, and so now they have hopefully developed more, and they have a good idea of what they need. And from the family perspective, you loosen the leash a little bit and let them go out there and figure it out. And the TVI as well, knowing that their academic career or journey is super important, but it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes. You have to be able to learn how to do these things. All of that is important. And then just as a man, you said it earlier, as a teenager, there's so much going on
Man, come on.
from a social standpoint, and you probably might be starting to get interested in certain people,
Yeah, yeah,
and you wanting to play sports and all these other things, and yeah, I mean, you're coming into your own. You're trying to figure out who you are and what your place is on this earth. And so there's so much going on.
so much.
But um but you have to understand that you have something super powerful. Is your voice, especially, and being able to speak up for what you want and what you need. And and then, eventually you may go to school, or I'm sorry, you may go to college,
Hmm.
you may go to a trade school, or who knows, you may not go to either one of those. But ultimately, you just have to know that, again, there's something about you that's unique and special, and the world needs it. And going into society, you need to contribute to the community just like the next person. And what you do as a teenager in those years are going to help establish that framework for what goes next. And hopefully you'll have that support from, that strong voice and strong support from your family, from your TVIs, from transition counselors, guidance counselors, whoever. um, all of those people are integral pieces to the puzzle. And I think that the both of us can agree that they need to, and when I say they, the TVIs, the counselors, all of those people, they have to be able to expose you to what you need to be aware of, so that you can utilize that as well, and kind of see what can be done, and see what direction you want to go. Um, so again, when it comes to that, with the advocacy piece, as a teenager, you start to move into that position where it's like, okay, I have to start taking some of this responsibility and shouldering some of this, some of these responsibilities moving
Yeah, yeah,
forward.
yeah.
A lot of them, because it's now, once I walk across that stage in high school, it's on and popping.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's almost like this whole time you have been, I don't want to say preparing for war, but you've been going through training. And now it's time to put everything that you trained for, you putting that to use. That's what happens the moment you get that diploma in your hand. I'm not gonna say the next day, but the moment you get that diploma in your hand, that whole dynamic switches. And this should be the process. It's almost like a transition. There should be a transition into you going in, and this is your independence. Now, it's not a complete. Everybody's taking their hands off, but that gradual period speeds up.
Mm,
The stepping back and loosening of the reins and you doing things on your own, that process speeds up just a little more than it did when you were a teenager. But once again, this partnership that you all have come together on, the goal as independent as possible, there's nothing else to work towards.
mm,
Everything that you're doing is working towards this. If it means you being able to, you know, go to your doctor's appointment and fill out your forms on your own, or being able to catch a service of some sort, the bus, Uber, Lyft, some kind of shared service to the grocery store,
yeah,
and that you can go in and do that by yourself. You can go to customer service and say that you need assistance. These are the things you need. Or if you can place an order, all these things need to be steps into getting you in the position to take care of yourself by yourself as best as possible. Now, everybody's not going to have that, but if everybody has that goal that they're working towards, it's
yeah,
going to look different for everybody else. But you got to work towards that. You have to, regardless of the disabilities that you have, regardless of whatever obstacles are in your way. If you constantly know this is what I'm working towards, those obstacles, regardless of how high, how difficult they are to overcome, you will overcome them and you'll be prepared for the next obstacle.
for sure. And I think the final piece to put the lid on that is, for that student who may not, that vision may not be as clear,
Mm-hmm.
it may not be a set in stone. That again is where the TVIs and parents
Yeah.
come into play, to be able to point out the things and let them know that, hey, this is a possibility. You can do this. I noticed that these are areas where your skills shine the brightest. Um, Being able to help them see that, because a lot of times the student may not have a vision, and you may have it, and
Right.
so it's important to help them to see it. And as a teenager, that's a critical time of life, because a couple years later you're going to be out in the world, you're going to be at college, you're going to be out in the community and in society. And if you have that vision and direction, it's going to, it's going to help. And it's okay. Again, excuse me. Certainly don't want to scare people if you don't have that vision. Um, I think that it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility where, students and kids are trying to figure it out. And that's totally understandable. But again, bringing it back to the TVIs and transition counselors is really, really important that you stay educated, continue to educate yourself, and continue to help your students to see what can be done, where they can go, and who they can become. It's
Right.
almost like you are a trampoline, you're a launch pad of sorts. And if you give them everything that they need, they can successfully just shoot off into the sky. And we hope that they're gonna hit their head on the moon.
There you go.
Um,
And real quick and then we're gonna let y'all go. The thing that I always tell the youth that I mentor, and this is for the youth I mentor with visual impairments, disabilities, and those who don't, both ends of that spectrum. The thing I always tell them, when you are going out into the world, you need to look at that as if you were going out in the world to work on a project. You're going out in the world to work on some sort of construction, right? You're in school to hone in on what those tools are that you have. You need to sharpen your tools, clean your tools, and put them in your toolbox. That's what this whole process is. So as for the support side, the family, the teachers, and all that. What tools are you helping them to sharpen and clean up and hone in on to put in that toolbox? Because you're not working on that goal if we're sending them out in the world with an empty toolbox.
Mm.
And that's my thing. What tools do you have? And those are those skills, those are those things and abilities that you can do really well. Some tools work better than others, but what tools are in your toolbox?
Man, hey,
Hey,
we
this
done
site
we
school.
done,
Hey, site school.
we've been hitting it, and I know that. I mean, we could talk about this forever, and I know that we're going to eventually come back to this. But if there was something that we missed, if you have a comment, you have a question, anything like that, Joe, where can they reach us?
Hey, first you can reach us at thesiteschool@gmail.com. That is thesiteschool@gmail.com. But secondly, please, three things we need you to do. We need you to comment underneath this video. Then we need you to like the video. And then please, please, please subscribe to the channel and turn that notification bell on. So anytime we upload any content, you will get it. So first, shoot us the email and then comment, like, and subscribe
Now, subscribing on that YouTube channel,
on YouTube.
Side School. So until next time, everyone, we appreciate you listening. This is a Site School. We out of here teaching people to see.
Peace out.